Good morning, I'm Chris Swift. Welcome to Market Day Report. When I left the office this morning, I saw everything was just a little bit lower. We've got the overnight session closed now this morning and fixing to open them all back up again at 8:30. Let's see how we're going to start off this morning, starting with our corn, and a little bit firmer since I left this morning. December corn now up 3 1/4 at 4.53 even. March corn up 4.77 3/4. Out to the July corn up 3/4 at 4.99. You got to get all the way out to September to get a 5 handle back on the corn market. In the soybeans, there's a little bit softer this morning after a pretty good run yesterday. Got the January beans down 1 1/2 at 13.45 1/2. March down 1/2 at 13.64 even. Out to the July contract down 2 at 13.81 3/4. Hard red winter wheat this morning down 8 on the December, 6.32 even. March down 2 1/2, 6.31 3/4, and May down 2 3/4, 6.36 1/2 even. Notice how close those front 3 months are, and I know December is going into expiration this month, but even March and May and July, there's just very little carry in that hard red premium anymore, hard red winter wheat premium anymore. Let's see what Chicago's doing this morning. Chicago's just down 1/4 on the December, 5.55 3/4. March down 1/2, 5.85 1/4. May down 1 1/4, 5.99 1/2, and got a little bit more of the carry charge in the Chicago wheat than you do the Kansas City. And we'll finish it off with Minneapolis spring wheat down 2 1/4 on the Dece at 6.94 even. March down 3/4 at 7.24 1/2, and May down 1/4 at 7.34 3/4. I've got my guest Brian Hoops this morning. Brian is with Midwest Market Solutions, and Brian, I know we've got the end of the month today and the start of a new month tomorrow, and the end of the year. Anything out there in the grain market that really catches your attention this morning for getting the end of this month and ready to start for next?
Well, good morning, Chris. So there's a few things that I thought were pretty surprising this morning. The first one, lack of deliveries against the corn market. We, look at those carries that you were just talking about in corn and expecting we'd see several thousand contracts of deliverable receipts against December corn futures, and there were none overnight, and that was a surprise. And you look at December corn into delivery period here, we rallied about 3 cents overnight, and that's a direct result, I think, of that surprise of lack of deliveries. Now, there was some in Chicago wheat, about 1,300 contracts or a little bit more than that, about 100 contracts of Kansas City wheat, no meal, no oil, and that's really not a surprise that we wouldn't see any meal deliveries. Then you also had the export sales out this morning, marking your high for corn. It was a pretty big number, of course. When you talk about marking your high, it's going to be a good number. Mexico and an unknown destination were our two best buyers. The soybean sales were good as well. Plus, we had a private export sale announcement of a couple cargoes of soybeans this morning to an unknown destination. There's been rumors that China has bought those cargoes of beans. That's been in the market last couple days, and I thought yesterday morning when there was that lack of that private sale announcement, soybeans kind of took a nosedive right off of the opening on some disappointment, did come back on those South American weather concerns. But you look at the wheat sales, those are very good as well. Not a marking year high, but a very good number, much above what we've seen here recently. So there's been rumors out there as well for the wheat market that China has bought a couple cargoes of wheat off the Pacific Northwest, and that's helped to rally that wheat market. But the lack of confirmation this morning may give a pause into that rally. So, a lot of things I think to watch in here for the grain markets. Weather in South America probably is still the number one driving focus here. And if you look at what's happening in soybean meal, that's been a real bull market last 12 months because of drought in Argentina. That soybean meal market has really given back a lot of gains here in the last couple of days, trying to break its uptrend because of those forecasted rains for Argentina, anticipating they're going to have a big crop this year.
All right, and I know we've seen the dollar break just a little bit lower over the last probably 6-7 weeks now. Is that kind of helping to spur some of this cash grain trade that we're seeing?
I have to think so, Chris. That is longer term bullish for our grain and our beef exports, or it should be anyway, because it makes our products in theory cheaper to the world markets. Now, we've seen a big rally in gold and silver in reaction to that drop in the US dollar index. So it should help us out. And maybe this is the first sign, this very strong export sales report that we saw this morning, maybe it's the first sign that we are starting to see some business filter back to the US for corn, soybeans, and wheat.
That's a great way to end the month and a good way to start next month. Brian, stay with me. We're going to take a real quick commercial break. We're talking with Brian Hoops. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Market Day Report. We didn't have any overnight trading in the cattle markets, so let's take a look at yesterday's close in preparation of what we're going to start off with today. December fat's up 25 at 171.90, and I'm almost positive we saw some 173 cash this week so far. The Fed market up 65 at 173.47. April fat's up 105 at 175.92. The feeder market that has seen exceptional volatility over the last couple of days. Jan contract up $1.15 at 222.20. March up 77, 224.27, and out to the April contract up 90 at 228.32. And even the hogs were a little bit better yesterday, up a nickel on the December, 68.97. They expire kind of early. Cash settled contract, I think they go off the board either the 14th or the 15th of December. February up 107 at 70.10, and the April contract up $1.47 at 76.47. I'd like to ask Brian Hoops to come back in for just a minute. And Brian, I know we've all sat here and watched the volatility in the feeder cattle market, and that seems to be the only thing people want to talk about. So let me hear your opinion about the volatility in the feeder cattle market.
Yeah, it's kind of been off the charts this week as far as the volatility goes. Last week and the beginning of this week, maybe a little bit more of a settled type trade yesterday. We're getting more aligned with some of the fundamentals in the cattle and the feeder cattle as far as narrowing the spread between the futures and where the cash index is in the case of feeder cattle and where the cash markets are for live cattle. Couple dollars softer trade on a dress basis around that 275 area for dress trade, about 175 or so on a live basis. So that's down $1 or so for the week. It's a little bit disappointing, but it does help us narrow that spread with where the futures are trading at. Export sales this morning for both beef and pork, when you combine the marketing years, you're back into that normal range where we have been trading for several weeks now and haven't seen much in the way of a bump. Even with this drop in prices that we saw in the cattle market here recently, you would expect to see, especially with that dollar lower like we talked about in the last segment, beef sales start to improve quite a bit. And that hasn't happened. And one of the things I think the cash-connected buyers are really talking about is the lack of a bounce in the cutout values. We did cut slaughter a bit last week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Usually you get at least a short-term bounce in cutouts, and we haven't seen that yet this week, and that keeps those packer margins in the red. They've improved a lot because the cash markets come down, but they're still in the red, and that's a longer term, obviously a negative for the cattle industry.
Yeah, I know we're kind of missing the rib rally. That's what we kind of connotated it to over the last several years there. Right after Thanksgiving, everybody's really hungry for a good beef roast and the Christmas party, so maybe we're missing on that. Maybe they'll be able to get out and start in that now. So, Brian, certainly do appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. As Brian Hoops, he is with Midwest Market Solutions. And Tammy, we got the market started here in just a very few minutes, and I'm anxious to see how it's going to go.
Oh, me too, especially in that cattle market.
Yes,
wow.
It's been
story of extremes.
A lot of fun.
All right, thanks, Chris.